Thanks for joining us for another episode of Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here at the News Forum where all voices matter. Well, the results are in, and Pierre Poilievre has been elected as leader of the Conservatives by a smashing margin. Here to discuss the details and implications is Stephen Taylor. He's a former senior political advisor to the leader of the opposition and a seasoned analyst. Good to have you back, Stephen.
Hey, thanks, Tony.
First, I'd love to get just your initial reactions to Pierre Poilievre's victory.
Yeah, well, it was kind of blowout, 68%. When you want to win on the first ballot in a field, uh, in a large field of candidates, it's a hard thing to do. Sometimes you want to eke out with 50% plus one votes to win on the first ballot, but I had estimated 58% Pierre on the first ballot, but he smashed through that at 68%, which I think only Stephen Harper in 2004 was able to pull off in the history of his party.
Yeah, Stephen was actually, I ran against Stephen Harper in that election, and Stephen was around 57%. So it even.
Okay, fair enough. I'll amend that. So Pierre smashed right through that.
Right through that. So, and of course, in British politics, Liz Truss won her leadership election by 57% as well. So, yes, Pierre Poilievre is in a class by himself. You probably know it riding by riding too. He won 330 out of 338 total ridings. Maybe just your sense of that too.
Yeah, well, I mean, Pierre's message resonated across the country with no matter where you lived. I think most Canadians and most conservatives are particularly concerned about affordability as an issue. And a campaign through Pierre's political videos and through his social media, he just kept repeating that point. It's about inflation, just inflation, as he calls it, about the affordability, about young people being able to afford homes to start families. It's a real concern for Canadians, and really his chief rival, Jean Charest, really just made this race about Pierre's tone rather than any substantial issue. And when you start to cut things down by process rather than by substance, you're going to be outmatched.
Interesting. You talked about the economic issues. We're going to return to those for sure. But any regional variations? This country is a combination of regions. Were there any areas of the country where Pierre was stronger or weaker, that kind of thing?
Well, look, I know that Pierre, for example, I mean, Conservatives have always been very strong in Saskatchewan and Alberta. I know that Pierre raised over $1 million just in Alberta. It's kind of hard to parse where he was strong, where he was weak when he wins 300 out of 338 ridings. So, I mean, there's going to be the typical places where you'd expect Jean Charest to have done well. I mean, especially compared to the race with Erin O'Toole, where Leslie Lewis was actually quite a factor, pulling in the social conservative vote. That was not a factor. This leadership, those votes pooled behind Pierre Poilievre, despite sort of the best wishes of some of the activists who were trying to rally the socially conservative vote behind Leslie Lewis.
So let's talk a little bit about the messages again. You started to talk about that. Which do you think were the most impactful for Pierre Poilievre?
Oh, affordability, the cost of home ownership, inflation. I mean, in a race in politics, whether it's for leadership or in a general election, you want to hit upon, two or three, up to five, as we saw, Stephen Harper, his first election that he won. But you want to really narrow it down to a few key themes. And for Pierre, it was affordability. It was inflation. It was the home ownership that really, I think, resonated with most Canadians. The Bitcoin element was a little interesting wrinkle, but as we saw that Bitcoin sort of crashed this year, or at least halved its value. We moved away from that issue pretty quick. But I think that it sort of went into the more broader frame that Pierre is starting to think about these issues a little bit more closely. He sold 312,000 memberships out of a total of 675,000. We saw that Patrick Brown's number of 150,000 might have been, not quite accurate because we certainly didn't see those people show up. or either cast a ballot. They might have been all in for Patrick Brown, or the number might have been inflated itself. So, and as for Jean Charest and Leslyn Lewis, they almost matched each other in strength, with Jean Charest just coming up ahead. So it really was Pierre's race, and he won it quite decisively.
And welcome back to Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here with Stephen Taylor. He's a former senior political advisor in Ottawa, and really our take on the political surroundings with the CPC leadership reaching its conclusion. Stephen, we've talked about the bread and butter issues, inflation, cost of living, et cetera. I'd love to get your take. It was almost a perfect storm in favor of Pierre Poilievre. These were the things he liked talking about. He's a former shadow finance minister, and he talked about those issues. And of course, at the same time, inflation was spiraling, cost of living was becoming more problematic, particularly for younger Canadians. Is this his path to victory against Justin Trudeau in the next federal election?
Yeah, I mean, the last 2 or 3 years with the global pandemic really shifted a lot of people's points of view and their priorities, and shifted government priorities as well. And we saw this Trudeau government cutting checks left, right, and center to most Canadians, and even still doing so, claiming that such economic fiscal policy will not spur on inflation, despite evidence to the contrary. We've run the experiment for the last 2 years. We've sort of seen what happens. There is debate. TD put out a report with, I think, Trevor Tomby in Alberta, relating what's behind inflation from government policy to supply issues. But Scotiabank says that, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, the prime rate could go above 4%, despite Justin Trudeau's assurances to the contrary, that his cost of living assistance to Canadians, cutting checks, will have nothing to do with inflation. And I think Conservatives disagree.
Yeah, that seems to be being panned, and I think Mr. Poilievre himself made a reference to that as well. So you're agreeing with me that the economy is going to be one of the big issues in the coming months and up until whenever the next election is.
Well, I mean, it always is. For Conservatives, when Conservatives win, they win on the economy. And like I said, this has been a perfect storm of the last 2 years. Converged all these issues, put the economy into focus for Canadians. And I think with Pierre, the difference between Pierre and Aaron O'Toole and Andrew Scheer, for example, is that Jean Charest pointed out it's on tone. Conservatives have someone who isn't afraid to throw a punch, will step out in front and take those hits. They've got a fighter in Pierre, and someone who doesn't sort of shrink away from a fight.
Were you surprised at the number of younger voters, millennials and younger, who flocked to Poilievre's campaign?
Not particularly, although as a Conservative, it's nice to see younger people join your party. Typically, younger people, it's the Winston Churchill quote, if you're young or if you're old, and you know which one I'm talking about.
Yes.
Yeah,
If you're young, you don't have a mind, but if you're old and you don't have a heart, that's the problem. Something like that.
Exactly. So people tend to become more conservative as they grow older, when they start paying more tax and start to have families and the rest. But younger people are starting to wonder if they're going to be able to afford a home. They're looking at the current government's plan for the economy and aren't overwhelmed by it, to say the least. So I think younger people are looking towards an alternative and really wondering if the opportunities afforded to their parents' generation or even their grandparents' generation will be afforded to them.
Yeah, there's a definite diminution in confidence in the future. And, Poilievre has been saying that people are not necessarily angry, but they're frustrated. But he wants to bring an element of hope to this, right?
Yeah. So Justin Trudeau ran on hope and hard work, And I saw an interesting communications note in some of the Poilievre camp's messaging after he won. And he said, uh, people are hurting, it's time to restore hope. So there's this element of hope that threads through senior political campaigns, Liberals and Conservatives, the last 10 years. But Justin Trudeau hasn't delivered on the hope. And Pierre is really just pointing out the obvious.
Yeah, interesting point. And of course, hope is always, you look at Barack Obama, that was the moniker for what he was doing as well. So when you're in opposition and the government looks older and more tired, you want to be the candidate of hope. But what Pierre Poilievre has done is attached it to actual economic issues. It's not just a slogan without any context. It is about the economic future. We're going to come back with Stephen Taylor after the break. Stay with us. And we're back here at Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here with Stephen Taylor. He's a former senior political advisor to the leader of the opposition. Stephen, let's talk about Justin Trudeau for a second. He had a cabinet retreat and a caucus retreat all around the time of the Conservative leadership election results, and seems to be trying to focus his government back onto inflation issues and so on. Tell us a little bit about what you see as Justin Trudeau's strengths and weaknesses when it comes to these issues.
Well, look, I think Justin Trudeau, of course, when you're in government, you're in the position of being able to write a lot of checks and to create a lot of sort of temporary euphoria, at the expense of long-term pain as we pay for these promises. But Justin Trudeau, I think, will continue to be writing checks. He just announced a deal with Jagmeet Singh to provide hundreds of dollars of more relief to what they call relief, just more money out to Canadians, which is, of course, is going to put pressure on inflation as well. So, look, I think Justin Trudeau is going to continue as he is. I think, though, that his senior political advisor, Jerry Butts, wrote the other day that Liberals shouldn't be depending on politics of division, cynical division, as they have in the past, because people who are from small, impoverished areas of the country care about the economy. And Pierre's talking about the economy. And I think the Liberals are starting to recognize that Pierre's tapped into something.
Yeah, so do you see them pivoting away? Because let's face it, Justin Trudeau's, since the election and during the last election, it was all about characterizing other Canadians that were not with him in a certain way, in a certain negative way. That divide and conquer strategy. But you're saying that there might be everybody talks about Pierre Poilievre pivoting, but it might be Justin Trudeau who might be doing the pivot.
If Justin Trudeau were an intelligent campaigner, which, he's won a number of elections, so let's give him some credit for that. He should be focusing on the economy through a Liberal frame. He should be trying to take away, the arrows out of Pierre's quiver, sling of arrows that will be coming at him. So he really needs to be talking about the economy and to disarm Pierre on a number of points. However, the Liberal vision of the economy, as I see it at least, is only exacerbating the problem. It's causing more inflation. It might be providing some short-term benefit to a handful of Canadians in strategic places, but it is creating long-term systemic rot in our system, in our economic system.
You mentioned a good point that for someone who wants to focus in on the economy and cost of living and inflation, Justin Trudeau and his cabinet have come up with a policy that is actually exacerbating the issue, spending more money, which, according to Pierre Poilievre's critique, got us into this mess in the first place. So he's kind of doubling down on it, but it also plays into the main critique that Pierre Poilievre has. Is that your point of view as well?
Yeah, I mean, one of the disadvantages to our current political system is that you really only run for the next 4 years, right? So you run on a 4-year short-term window, whereas you can take out a loan essentially on the future in order to benefit your stakeholders in the present. And yeah, I think that the more Pierre points it out, it's harder for him to connect those dots because of the sort of that short-term benefit that Canadians can see when Justin Trudeau opens up the piggy bank. But yeah, it's going to be I think it's going to be a fight on the economy between Justin Trudeau and Pierre Poilievre. I think everything else is a distraction, and I think that Pierre's already recognized this, and I think that Liberals are slowly coming to recognize it.
And it doesn't seem to be going away. The gas prices have receded, but other food prices are still high, and other prices are still high, right?
That's right. So gas prices will go up; they will go down, depending on on supply, and also depending on how much pressure the government is putting on consumers through extra layers of taxation, whether it's through a carbon tax or through production, refining, layers on producers. So, yeah, I mean, food prices.
We're going to have to, sorry to do this to you, we have to take a short break. Welcome back to Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here discussing the CPC leadership election, general political and economic framework in politics in Canada right now with Stephen Taylor, former senior political advisor to the Leader of the Opposition. But yeah, we were just talking off air about the importance of knowing as a politician, price of a loaf of bread, price of a liter of milk. Yeah, your comments on that.
Yeah, well, it's a hallmark of politics. It's always the easiest gotcha when it comes to asking a politician who maybe has been in his own or her own bubble for quite a long time how much a quart of milk is, or a loaf of bread, and or a liter of milk. But this is true in Canada, but it's also true in far-flung places, in other countries as well. So this is inflation, the cost of living. It is almost a core fundamental first principle of popular electoral politics. You need to know what challenges are facing the everyday Canadian, the everyday voter. And if you're out of touch, you're out of luck.
Right. So that's going to be an interesting measurement for Mr. Trudeau and Mr. Poilievre for sure. What's next for Pierre Poilievre? Does he have a united party and caucus at this point? And what does he do next?
Yeah, well, we saw the departure of Alan Reyes from caucus yesterday. I think that he wanted a senior leadership role in Pierre's parliamentary caucus team, and I think that he was turned down. I think that Pierre is going to be looking to run a program on the economy, a platform on the economy that speaks to every Canadian, that speaks less to special interests. And I think that for Mr. Reyes, that was a problem. But look, Pierre is going to focus on, again, uniting the party and caucus after a leadership race. But look, I mean, 68% of members selected Mr. Poilievre in a very decisive win. He doesn't have a lot of work to do on the party caucus unity front there. I think most members would say that a vast majority, a high 90s, would have confidence in Mr. Poilievre's leadership if it was put to a vote today. But look, I think Mr. Poilievre needs to refine his message towards broader Canadian public rather than just party membership. A little less red meat. You're going to see a little less talk about, I think, privatization of the CBC. For example, you're going to see a little bit more talk about, everyday economic issues that affect Canadians. So you run on the red meat in the primaries, and you run on broader-based policy appeal for the general election. Look, Mr. Trudeau has a minority government. He might want to pull the plug at any point, and there's no better time than either when a leader is just being introduced to the Canadian people, although Mr. Poilievre is pretty well known, So now's a good time to pull the plug as a party's trying to get its feet. But whether or not we see that will speak to Mr. Trudeau's confidence in his own prospect.
Do you think Pierre Poilievre is well known enough outside of the kind of the activist group of Canadians talking about more regular folks? Does he still have a sales job to do? I guess is what I'm asking.
I mean, in politics, you always do. People always sort of, if you're out of the news for a long enough time, you will not stick in the minds of those who are voting. Especially since the average Canadian thinks about politics seven seconds a week. So they don't think about Mr. Poilievre. They don't think about Mr. Trudeau that often. So it is always incumbent upon a politician to sell themselves and to make sure their brand is out there. And look, Mr. Poilievre has been very successful on social media, not necessarily reaching out to traditional media, which is fine. But look, Mr. Poilievre has been very successful on social media and alternative media platforms like the News Forum and like other upstart, successful news platforms that are up and coming. But look, he's tapping into a lot of support and a lot of interest on social and alternative media.
We're going to have to leave it at that. Stephen Taylor, thanks for joining us today. It's been great talking to you.
You bet.
All the best. Interesting insights there by Stephen Taylor about the political scene with Pierre Poilievre's election as Conservative leader. Thanks for joining us today. Interesting broadcast.